Welcome to Once Upon a Coin, documenting the ongoing history of blockchain and cryptocurrency. And as always, I'm your storyteller, Jason Cassidy. Today's story is a special one in that we're going to be taking our focus away from cryptocurrency and instead looking at a person who's been tirelessly advocating for Bitcoin and blockchain tech for a very, very long time now. He's one of the most well-known and respected figures in the entire crypto community, and for good reason. There's a lot of people out there today that are involved in Bitcoin because of one person and one person alone. A person who's inspired millions to buck the system and try out something new for a change. Heck, he was even one of my inspirations for getting into Bitcoin back in 2012. So, enough said. This is the story of Andreas Antonopoulos.
Sun cast a shadow, a digital line is coming over the mountain and over your mind. Double down your Bitcoin, hang on for the ride. We're moving into the future, one block at a time. We're moving into the future, one block at a time.
As with all great stories, we really should start at the very beginning. Andreas Antonopoulos was born in London, England, all the way back in 1972. As his name suggests, Andreas has a British-Greek background, having moved from the UK to Athens, Greece in 1974, where he was raised. His relationship with technology can be seen as early as age 10 when he was introduced to his first computer. The machinery, the parts that made up its composition, and most importantly, what you could do with it were all fascinating discoveries for him. His passion for technology kept growing, and at age 14 he had his first encounter with a modem, learning the idea behind the internet and what it could do for humanity one day in the future. This understanding of networking would serve as the first foundational pillar for when he would eventually learn about blockchains. In the coming years, business would grow to become a very important part of Andreas' life. After starting a few companies and feeling disenfranchised about the tough economic times the country was facing, a decision was made that a change of scenery was in order. With both business and education becoming a priority in his life, Andreas moved back to the UK at age 17 and eventually enrolled in the University College of London. During this time, Andreas earned degrees in computer science along with data communications, networks, and distributed systems. So we can start to see that the seeds were being planted here as Andreas' love for technology was becoming pretty evident. This education would end up serving Andreas well, as it gave him a deep background in areas of technology that would one day end up dominating the world. Once school was done, Andreas packed his bags and moved to the good old United States of America. During this time, he became part of the cypherpunk movement, which was opposed to the control that the US government was asserting towards people's privacy and their rights towards freedom. Little did Andreas know that the simple act of joining a cypherpunk mailing list would end up altering the course of the rest of his entire life. In 2003, he took his passion to the next level when he became a founding partner and senior vice president at Nemertes Research. Andreas invested a lot of his time there looking into network security. And he felt very strongly about one particular insight that he had gained during all this time looking into these matters. The biggest future threat to computer security wouldn't be posed by skilled hackers. Instead, that threat would come from overly complex systems that would be a result of rapid changes in the business world. So, Andreas wasn't worried about a nefarious group of digital thieves. His fear was humanity's tendency to tinker with a good technology every time a new need arose. Too much tinkering would eventually lead to too much complexity, and that would eventually lead to greater security risks. Andreas ended up leaving Nemertes Research in 2011. And this of course left him with a lot more free time on his hands. Time enough to be introduced to Bitcoin and even more time to begin obsessing over it, learning everything he possibly could about it. Looking back, you really did have to be in the right place at the right time when it came to Bitcoin in this early era. First, you had to be introduced to it somehow and actually pay attention. Secondly, you had to have your time free to throw yourself into it and learn everything from the ground up. And that's because back then, there weren't courses that you could take or various series on YouTube that break down the technology like there is today. And even if you were lucky to have ample free time to learn about it, you still had to be ambitious and curious enough to venture down this rabbit hole. And eventually, no matter how much time you had to look into Bitcoin, at some point, you'd reach the level where you were looking to get your hands on some. Usually, this meant parting with some of the money we had in our wallet. And for most of us, this is where the novelty of Bitcoin eventually started to wear off. Suffice to say, there were a lot of people that heard about Bitcoin back in the day, but very few of us decided to go to the next level and actually take advantage of that opportunity. An opportunity that would not just end up changing our own lives, but many others along with it. This is the path that Andreas Antonopoulos took when it came to Bitcoin. Andreas first heard about Bitcoin back in 2011, but like most people did when they first encountered it, he too dismissed it. Half a year would pass before the crypto gods would once again interject themselves into Andreas' life. This time, it was an article that he was reading that had a link to the Bitcoin white paper inside of it. Instead of dismissing Bitcoin again, this time he clicked the link and he actually read the white paper. After going over it, everything clicked for him. And for Andreas Antonopoulos, life would never be the same again. He was completely obsessed with what he had just discovered. He spent the next 4 months doing nothing but sleeping, and when he was awake, research and discussing Bitcoin for 16 hours a day, every single day. So sure was he that Bitcoin would eventually change how people viewed money, he made a pretty big decision. He completely abandoned his freelance consulting job so he could focus 100% of his time on Bitcoin. This allowed him to do what he really loved, which was teach people things he felt truly passionate about. Andreas learned over the years that while he enjoyed programming, it was more of a hobby than it was a career path. So once he made the decision to go full-time into crypto, it wasn't to start coding the next killer app on the blockchain. It was quite the opposite, in fact. For Andreas, one of the biggest hurdles to Bitcoin succeeding was people learning about it and feeling empowered enough to get involved themselves. This led him down the path of attending cryptocurrency conferences and speaking at events whenever he was able to. He also consulted for Bitcoin startups and would write articles on the subject for free to help get the word out to the masses. One such example of this was the Bitcoin conference that was held in May of 2013 in San Jose. He was able to convince the event organizers that even though he was an unknown in the industry at the time, he still deserved a speaking spot. So while Gavin Andresen was giving his State of the Bitcoin Union speech in the main hall, Andreas was giving his own speech to a room of about 20 to 30 curious onlookers.
The topic I want to talk about today is Bitcoin neutrality. Bitcoin neutrality. What does Bitcoin neutrality mean? Neutrality in Bitcoin means being able to adopt Bitcoin in any culture, any language, any religion, any geography, but also any political or economic system.
None of this mattered to Andreas because he was having fun doing what he loved. And in the years that followed, the crowds that would form to hear Andreas speak would swell to some pretty crazy numbers. In 2014, he officially put his name on the cryptocurrency map by making a series of pretty big moves. It started in January when he joined the company Blockchain Info, becoming their chief security officer. Back then, this was actually a pretty big deal as there weren't very many high-profile blockchain companies in existence. But given that Blockchain Info was known for offering the world the first Bitcoin block explorer, it was one of the few big names at the time. He also raised his profile in academic circles when he was appointed as a teaching fellow at the first university in the world to offer a master's degree in digital currency. On July 1st, Andreas enjoyed his biggest triumph yet when he published a book called Mastering Bitcoin, Unlocking Digital Currencies. The book was well received, and more importantly, it helped cement his reputation as a thought leader in the blockchain industry. He would go on to write many more books on topics that were all relevant to Bitcoin and blockchain tech. On October 8th, he spoke to the Banking, Trade, and Commerce Committee in the Canadian Senate. This was done to help address questions that some of the politicians had around regulating Bitcoin in Canada. Andreas continued to travel the world in the coming years, helping people understand the power that Bitcoin possessed to liberate humanity. By 2016, the brand power that his name possessed was enough to land him a spot on the very popular Joe Rogan Experience podcast.
I'll send an invoice, and the banking industry conference will send me a wire transfer. It takes, on average, 4 weeks for me to get it, with several calls to find out where it went, what's going on, why did it get lost? And it takes me on average 15 minutes to get paid in Bitcoin, no matter which country I'm being paid in.
This is a cynic in me. Is this because when they take the money and they're transferring it and they're moving it around, and now it's sitting in banks, when banks have money, if they have your money, even if it's just for a few weeks, they have the opportunity to use that money to make more money?
You know that you've made it in whatever field you're practicing in when you're being asked to go ahead and speak with Joe Rogan at his place over in Texas. It's also around this time that Ethereum is beginning to make some serious waves, and Andreas intelligently decided to expand his focus in the industry beyond just Bitcoin.
I've ran Ethereum nodes for a while now. I still run one. Actually, I run two. I run one Geth and one Parity. I've run a Zcash node for a while. I experimented with a testnet. I've been involved in Ethereum since the very beginning. I'm interested in both of those platforms.
He stressed the importance of experimentation in a rapidly evolving landscape. The belief here being that some of the lessons learned from these innovations being tested out in the wild could prove to be incredibly useful. The industry could learn what was working and what wasn't working by simply just trying other stuff out. It didn't always have to be just about Bitcoin.
We now know how DAOs fail. Yeah, reentrancy bugs. Nobody was talking about reentrancy bugs before the DAO. We've learned a lot since. So if other systems in the broader ecosystem of blockchains run experiments, you should have a bit of faith. You should have a bit more faith in the thing that you believe in to say, let them do their thing. I don't need to warn other people that they're scams or shitcoins. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I'm not the oracle. Maybe other people should do their own research and find out for themselves. And maybe some of those experiments are going to teach us something useful.
Andreas completely embraced the altcoin movement when on December 1st, 2018, he released his Mastering Ethereum, Creating Smart Contracts and dApps book. And just like all of his previous endeavors in writing, this too was a commercial success. By the time the next decade kicked off, Andreas was easily a top 10 figure in the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry. He was on podcasts, writing books, speaking at major conferences, and consulting for some pretty serious companies, among other things. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Andreas simply evolved his approach when it came to speaking at events by conducting them all in the virtual. While the year of 2020 was a tough one for the planet, when viewed through the eyes of a cryptonaut, it wasn't actually all that bad. The industry was still recovering from the crazy bull market of 2017. And with lockdowns now being applied and people not having a whole lot to do, crypto was just a natural curiosity for them to look into. By the time the calendar had flipped over to 2021, a new bull market in crypto was ready to commence. One that would feature NFTs or non-fungible tokens as the centerpiece. This is a good point in the story to mention something that's very important about Andreas' personality. Despite his tireless promotion of blockchain and Bitcoin technologies, he never once focused on the price aspect of it. When you consider how big the numbers go up narrative in Bitcoin is and all the crazy influencers shelling price points, it really is remarkable that perhaps the biggest goat of all crypto influencers never let his focus shift in that direction. Looking him up on YouTube reveals thousands of hours of content over the last decade plus that Andreas has been preaching the Bitcoin gospel. What you won't find much of is price speculation or him taking endorsements from crypto startups trying to shill the next shitcoin ICO. There really is something to be said for having integrity and using your platform to promote the things that you truly believe in. So now this begs the question, what has Andreas been up to lately? Well, more of the same. And if you can believe it, after this long in the industry, he's actually going harder than ever before. He can still be found advocating for privacy, sane crypto regulations, and an open source culture to spur innovation. And he's managed to build up quite a following on social media, as evidenced by his Twitter, or as they call it today, X account. Beyond that, there is literally a lifetime of content sitting on YouTube for you to absorb if you're curious, and I highly encourage you to check it out because it really is all-encompassing. And if you're looking to catch Andreas in person, well, I've got some good news for you. He is still quite active on the conference circuit, which means you still have an opportunity to hear him speak live. When it's all said and done, there'll probably be very little that Andreas Antonopoulos hasn't done in crypto outside of shilling price predictions. This man is one of the true OGs of the industry, having started out in Bitcoin early on and then slowly branching out as the industry matured. Even if he were to quit crypto today, which thankfully he's not. His legacy is intact, and it serves as a primer for making your life whatever the heck you want it to be. No one gave permission to Andreas to get involved in Bitcoin like he did back in 2012. He just went out and did it. And he just kept doing his thing for so long with so much passion that eventually the world had no choice but to start paying attention. But perhaps the coolest thing about this all? He didn't even have to raise his voice in the process. I hope you enjoyed today's stroll down memory lane. Until next time, have fun and enjoy life, my friends. I'll be back soon with another incredible story to tell you.